Answer for House Bill 498 here. We'll now open the hearing on House Bill 498. Representative Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jade Barr, B-A-H-R. And I'm bringing before your consideration House Bill 498 on behalf of my constituents. Now, first off, regarding this bill, I want to run through a brief timeline of medical marijuana, because I want to emphasize the fact that this is something that's been used for millennia. It's not a new drug that needs rigorous testing so much anymore. So it was believed to originate 500 years before Christ in Asia, and it was being used as a medicinal plant during that time. By the 1800s, cannabis extracts were sold in pharmacies and doctors throughout Europe and the United States to treat stomach problems and ailments. By the 1900s, it was being used recreationally in the U.S. In 1937, there was fears in the Prohibition era which criminalized it. And by 1970, it was listed as a Schedule I drug. But in 1996, California passed the Compassionate Use Act, making it accessible to patients for medicine. In 2004, Montana voters overwhelmingly passed I-148, 62 to 38. In 2011, the legislature tried to bring a bill that would totally reverse the voters' decision, but then it was vetoed by the governor. And instead, Senate Bill 423 was passed, requiring much stricter regulations and, in turn, stricter access to it. This law specifically prohibited those under the supervision of the Department of Corrections from obtaining a DPHHS-issued medical marijuana program card. In 2016, the voters once again passed a ballot initiative that reformed SB 423 and restored nearly all the protections afforded under the original voter-passed law in 2004. The one notable exception to this voter-backed initiative is that it did not restore the ability of probationers and parolees to participate in the program, and this prohibition remains in place under current state law. There's over 10,000 Montanans who are supervised by the Department of Corrections, Probation, Parole. These 10,000 Montanans are a group that suffer from higher rates of almost every condition for which medical marijuana is routinely prescribed under state law. One condition which in particular stands out is the post-traumatic stress disorder, which was approved as a qualifying condition under Montana legislature. So I think in this demographic, we have some stigmas, or we have an idea that's conjured up in our mind of who's on probation. It's not just some undeserving thug. It's people who are actually wanting to access a medicinal plant for their medical conditions. And so with that, I will just let any proponents or opponents speak. Thank you.
Can I see a show of hands, please? How many people would like to testify on this bill? All right, we're running ahead of schedule, so we'll have 20 minutes for proponents.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Toppen, that's T-O-P-P-E-N, and I'm here today representing the Montana Public Interest Research Group. I stand in support of House Bill 498. Individuals who are fulfilling the terms and obligations of their parole should not be denied access to medical treatments prescribed to them by a doctor. The state of Montana has determined that medical marijuana is a legitimate medical solution, a position that has been reaffirmed by the voters multiple times. By denying parolees access to treatment, we continue to perpetuate a system in which pain relief is tied to criminal history. If parolees are trusted to live at home and work on, if parolees are permitted to live at home and work with limited supervision, they should be trusted to consult with a doctor to find treatment that works for them. I thank the sponsor for bringing forward this bill, and I would urge a due pass on 498. And Mr. Chair, if it's all right with you, I'd like to be excused from questioning. I have another hearing to attend.
Any objection from that? No, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further proponents?
Chairman Doan, my name is Alex Gray, Gray. I'm with SD Consulting. I'd like to tell a personal story. I have a friend who, after high school, he joined the military. First he was stationed in North Korea, and then he went to Afghanistan, and then he went to Iraq. And when he was in Iraq, he saw some action. His vehicle hit an IED and stuff. And so he came back with PTSD. And when he came back, he started drinking. I think that was the way he tried to deal with the trauma and deal with the stress that he experienced. And in a very short time, he found himself kicked out of virtually every bar in town. Luckily, he was trying to fight people and just paranoid because of the experiences he'd gone through. Luckily, he didn't get in extreme trouble because eventually he ended up getting his medical marijuana card, and he went from out trying to fight people at bars to staying home taking care of his kid. It enabled him to be a functional person. He holds a steady job out at the base. It really made a day and night difference in his whole mental outlook, treating his symptoms with alcohol versus treating it with medical marijuana. And I wouldn't want anybody else to be denied that opportunity, because they did get in that bar fight and did actually get in trouble for it, because it just perpetuates the cycle of recidivism. Alcohol is a dangerous drug. Alcohol does get people violent, and it's not the right way to be treating things like PTSD and all the other various things that medical cannabis can be good for. So I'm in strong support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Good morning, committee. Chairman Doan. My name is Erica Siate, for the record, Ericasiate. I stand in support of this bill. I've worked in the medical marijuana industry and met a significant amount of people that have told me that they have very valid qualifying conditions for medical marijuana, and then they told me that they're not able to get their card because of this reason. So for that, I stand in support of the bill and urge to pass.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Good morning, Chair Doan, members of the committee. My name is Garrett Langford. My last name is spelled Lankford. I work for the Montana Human Rights Network. I'll be brief as well, just to respect y'all's time. We look at healthcare with a lens on a human right access, and acknowledge that just as we had access aspirin or any other medicine, medical marijuana does provide a service, and equitable provisions of that are right, I think. Thanks.
Further proponents?
Chairman Doan, my name is Danielle Mugley. It's spelled Muggli, and I'm with the Patients' Rights Network of Montana. And I support this bill. There is a lot of people, as they were saying earlier, with PTSD and other qualifying conditions that are on the probationary programs here in Montana. Many of them can get opioids and prescribed other medications through their doctors and are allowed to use them. And many of them don't want the same addiction issues that come with those because they come from a place of addiction. Many of them are in AA and other things like that. And I think that by allowing them to use cannabis, it will cut down on the amount of opioids that are used in that particular situation. Not to mention our current law with the way that the DUI works with the 5 nanogram limit puts a lot of our patients in dangers of becoming criminals. If, say, perhaps a police officer is discriminatory and knows the law well enough to understand that most patients are always over the 5 nanogram limit no matter what, because it doesn't come out of your system for about 30 days. I'm in support of this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Good morning. My name is Angela Goodhope, and that's Goodhope. I apologize for my attire. I did drop off kids and walk a dog and then hustle over to the Capitol. I found parking pretty close, so I'm pleased about that. I'm a proponent of this bill more for the people in this community who are offenders, who are on probation. Is not the idea to avoid recidivism after they've been excused from their time? If this helps them do that, remain calm, be at home, be good parents, why would we not support that? They have a probation officer who is overseeing them, and this is a relationship between an individual and their doctor. What is almost more sacred besides your priest and your parishioner, right? So I would just ask that you really consider thinking about this hard, because it may help everyone around you to help these people become better citizens. And again, it is a relationship between their doctors and themselves. It's not between the law. There's plenty of oversight. There's all kinds of scientists that keep track of what's in their system. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, S.K. Rossi, ROSSI, with the ACLU of Montana. We stand in support of the bill. As you've heard me say before in this committee, we did do a probation and parole report last year. I believe I handed it out to everybody. It was the very thick one. One of the things we found in that report is that access to services, especially mental health care and other types of health care, are one of the things that lead people to be successful when they're on probation and parole. So in the state of Montana, having access to medical marijuana counts as health care, and people on probation and parole should have full access to the full range of health care out there, just like anybody else would. I also just want to point out that the ACLU always advocates for full restoration of rights for folks who are no longer incarcerated, and having access to that medical marijuana is a right that people have in Montana, and we'd appreciate if people on probation and parole could have access to that right just like anyone else. Thanks.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Holeva, CHOLEWA, for the MTCIA, and we just stand in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Senator Jen Gross, GROSS, and I represent Senate District 25. I'd like to thank Representative Barr for bringing this bill forward on behalf of her constituents, who are also my constituents. So as I've been out knocking doors in our district for the past 2.5, 4 years, actually 10 years, I've been working on campaigns about that long, but this issue comes up often. And we've also heard a lot in the last 1.5 years about the opioid crisis. In fact, we just passed the bill out of Senate Health that aims to get a handle on that issue. I think that medical marijuana can be a safer alternative, and I would urge the committee to keep that in mind. Mr. Chairman, I have committee upstairs, if I may be excused.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Hello, my name is Benjamin Back. I used to be a correctional officer at Montana State Prison about 4.5 years. I've just seen a lot of people come in there as new inmates coming back for things involved in this. So I support this bill. I just don't think it's right for these guys to get out and then have to right away be subject to all this. They should be allowed to get these cards. Thank you.
Could you spell your last name for us, please, sir?
B-A-C-K.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Further proponents?
Hi, my name is Doreen Bomar, D-O-R-E-E-N-B-O-M-A-R. My company has submitted an application to become a medical marijuana provider in Montana, and I am supportive of this bill. As it was stated, there are, I think, over 11,000 people currently on probation and parole in Montana. And there have been many others that have been on probation and parole that are no longer, or that may be in the future. So it doesn't just apply to this small number. It's a number that, as you know, grows and shrinks as people make their way through the system. It was said already that there are a number of conditions that medical marijuana is a superior treatment option for, with much less or no side effects. And I'd just like to point out that there are things like seizure disorders, Crohn's disease, things that affect anyone, those who are unlucky enough to have those. And medical marijuana is the best option for those people. Seizure disorder drugs have all kinds of negative side effects. In many people, it can kind of lead to zombie-like symptoms. Medical marijuana gives people their lives back. And so I'd also like to state that since this was the law already, Office of Probation and Parole already followed that previous law and didn't have issues, and was able to learn more about the needs of the people that they're supervising. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further proponents?
Hello, my name is Kyle Nelson, Kyle-Nelson. I own a Dermworks custom tattoo, and I opened a nonprofit for veteran service members and first responders last year called Helena's Got Your Six. I personally have some great friends who served. His name is David Poole. He's a Silver Star recipient, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 with Valor, 4 Purple Hearts. He was prescribed morphine, 120 milligrams a day. That's enough to kill me easily right now. And I've watched him go through a really hard time with that and almost end his life, and I still got that post-it note. And that was rough. And I don't know if you've ever seen a ghost or someone you've known your whole life and not known him in a second. I've seen that. He's done his duty, and I feel that morphine and opiates like that should not be allowed in my mind, and I think medical marijuana could have helped him through his struggles. And I personally have another friend who's also been in the service that uses medical marijuana that's helped him a lot. I'm sorry that I'm not very formal with all this. I've never done this before, but I strongly support this bill, and I hope you guys consider this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Further proponents? Any further proponents to House Bill 498? Seeing none. Opponents? Oh. Yeah, I think so. Oop, we're still on proponents here, I believe.
Hey, I'll just apologize right up front. I've never done this before. I'm a combat veteran. Served in Iraq. I was injured over there. I have TBI and PTSD. Been through a couple struggles with treatment for PTSD treatment, and went through pages of pharmaceutical medicines, trying to find something that worked. It's probably 10 different pages of stuff that I had to go through. Couldn't find anything that worked. Had somebody suggest medical marijuana, and it's been a life changer for me. It really has. That's all I've got, folks.
Sir, for the record, could we get your name, please?
Nick Percival.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Nick Percival.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Got
it. Further proponents? Seeing none. Opponents to House Bill 498? Seeing none. Informational witnesses?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Katie Donath, D-O-N-A-T-H. I am the Eastern Bureau Chief for the Probation and Parole Division with the Department of Corrections. I'm here to answer any questions anyone may have on current procedure.
All right. Further informational witnesses? Seeing none. Questions from the committee? Representative Manzella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Danielle Moakley. Moakley, I believe?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Moakley, I'm fairly ignorant on this subject, and you sparked my interest.
Could you pull the microphone up a little bit?
Indicating that there's a limit in the bloodstream of 5 nanograms. Is that correct?
Yes,
Could
it
you
is
expound
correct.
on that a little bit?
I'm not a 100% expert, but I've been following this particular issue for a while now. Essentially, there's no connection between blood nanogram level and intoxication levels. The best way I can describe it is just because somebody uses medical marijuana does not mean that they're constantly high, if you will. Essentially, the 5 nanogram limit has just been put on by a lot of the recreational states without a lot of scientific backing. And I've seen it personally affect patients' lives in a negative manner to the point to where they've gotten charged with some pretty serious charges for DUI when I can say that they were not driving under the influence. I can understand that there are people out there that shouldn't just get in their car right after they smoked and drive. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is if I were to smoke last night, eat dinner, go to bed, wake up, eat breakfast, and then go get tested, I would still test over the 5 nanogram limit, and I can guarantee you that I would not still be high. And that's what concerns me about our current law, is that it puts a lot of patients in the way of being in trouble with the law, especially if an officer is discriminatory against medical marijuana and knows how it works in the body, because it takes up to 30 days for it to get clear. I'm not sure when the 5 nanogram limit would be reached as far as active THC, if it'd be like 2 days, 3 days, 5 days before it was out of your system correctly. But if I can ever afford it, I'm definitely going to take the time to get my base bloodline tested just to see where it goes.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Follow-up?
Okay, so what you're saying then, we could pass this bill and that limit could still come back to...
Yeah, no, it's just in current law as it is, no matter what we pass in this bill.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For our informational witness, please.
Ms. Donath.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Donath, could you explain for us what difference it would make if this bill passed in terms of the system that you work in?
It would allow for those individuals who meet the qualification. Sorry, Representative, Mr. Chair.
Could you pull the microphone up a little, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
What it would do is it would just allow for those individuals who are currently under the supervision of the Department of Corrections and those who will come on to either maintain and keep their current medical marijuana card or obtain a medical marijuana card.
Follow up. Please. Do you know, Ms. Donath, Mr. Chair, why the law was changed so that using medical marijuana is forbidden right now for parolees? Do you know why that happened? Did it have anything to do with what the parole officers wanted to have happen?
Representative, Mr. Chair, I am not sure on that. No.
Thank you.
I see a volunteer in the back that would like to answer that question.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Holeva. I spelled it earlier, Cholewa. I've been tracking this issue since 2010, worked professionally in it on and off, boxes of the history. And when in 2011, so there was the 2004 law that I consider, it wasn't developed enough to support the level of activity that evolved from it. And then in 2011, there was an effort in this legislature for a while, and in the interim before it, to try to bring proper regulatory infrastructure to what was actually happening. Because a lot of people were just extrapolating from the law. Well, it doesn't say you can't, and as the patient numbers grew, they're trying to make it work. But then things got nuts, because people go from extrapolating from the law to just having the impression there is no law. So then, as we know, in 2011, there were the federal raids that happened right during the legislative session, which really was a bucket of ice water, across this state. And it happened right during the legislature. In fact, it happened on the day the Senate Judiciary Committee was voting on repeal of the law altogether, which made it all the more dramatic. So then when the legislature put together Senate Bill 423, which I believe the sponsor referenced, it was a clamp down, make it stop kind of bill, whether you were someone providing it, whether you were a patient. It just tried to, and they even called it de facto repeal. So it was an effort to make it very restrictive. And then following the session, there was a lawsuit, the MTCIA versus the state of Montana, that just had 4 or 5 provisions of that law enjoined. So it's like, yes, you could have more than 3 patients. Yes, you can be remunerated. And it just sort of allowed the law to let the program exist. So it went from 30,000 patients to, in that interim, to about 12,000. And then the lawsuit, when it came to an end, brought that 2011 law into full effect. And everything shut down again for about 2.5 months. And the initiative, actually, what it brought back was not that 2004 law. What it brought back was the program as it operated under 423 as enjoined by the courts. So it really didn't change a lot. other than adding inspections and licensing to try to bring some oversight. And then the 2017 legislation tried to make things more transparent. Again, not changing the structure of the market so much as trying to make it transparent, because you can't regulate something that's happening underground. So I think what's happening right now is we're seeing an evolution. I mean, our organization was tried to be conservative, last session in terms of we need to keep getting this transparent and managed, as opposed to creating more openness. I'm not quite sure what word to use, but I do think it is. Things have changed nationally, and so this idea that in 2011 of clamping down on, say, someone on probation, who might have cancer, at that time it was just nobody should have this. And I think that things are really evolving, and that maybe it is time where we still need to regulate the program. I think some of the really onerous provisions that were there trying to bring a program under control, it really is time to reconsider them. And just got an email recently. The National Conference on Weight and Measures, for example, has taken on cannabis in terms of how to figure those things out. Anheuser-Busch is buying companies. ASTM International is developing standards. So it just, given what's going on, it seems like someone on probation who has a medical condition should be able to use medical marijuana. So I think it's about the evolution of things from exploding to highly restrictive to now trying to unwind things and see what's really appropriate.
Thank you. Representative Skis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Donath, please.
Ms. Donath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Donath. Are there any components to the Department of Justice in Montana for the parole that is receiving federal funds for any project that you're doing currently? The reason I'm asking is because to the feds, this is still a Schedule I drug. Would they then be able to say to take away your funding? Is there any risk of that in this?
Representative Skeeves, Mr. Chair, I am not aware of that answer. I can get you that answer.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, thank you. And another one for you. I don't know how familiar you are with the bill, but in the very beginning, and I can re-refer this, Mr. Chair, if there's a question. In the very beginning, the law reads, correctional facility or program means a facility or program that is described in 53.1.202. When you read 53.1.202, these next two sections are already in there, but they've removed in pre-release centers, they've removed under intensive supervision, under parole or probation pursuant to Title 46, in other appropriate programs, and last, the Montana Correctional Enterprise Prison Industries Training Program. Why do you know why that would be removed? What does that mean in this bill? Does it mean that just the A and B of this bill now supersedes all of those groups? I'm at a loss to explain why they did that.
Representative,
Could you pull up the microphone a little bit, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the bill and I see that my copy has that a facility or program is crossed off, and then it covers all the prisons, and then it covers community-based residential programs under contract, which would include pre-release treatment facilities. It would include those facilities as well.
Follow up, Mr.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're saying that they just basically tightened up the code so that you think it still includes everything that was already in the original?
That is my understanding.
Awesome.
Would you like to re-refer that to the bill sponsor? Or?
No, I'm good. Thank you. That answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Representative Skis.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was giving other folks a chance, but I'm going to throw this one out there. This is for the bill sponsor, please.
Mr. Chair, Representative Skis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Barr. I must disclose that I was there in 2011, and so I voted against taking it away from the people by eliminating the Citizens Amendment because I don't think that's right, but I did vote for the sideboards. And I remember that clearly when the feds came in and wiped out those folks. And there were at least three, but there were many more in my district. By that time, it was $1.5 billion industry. And when the feds came in, they felonized everybody that was involved. All those folks had all their assets taken. Their lives were ruined. They were felons to this day. They still can't vote. They can't own firearms. And all those folks came to us in the legislature and said, why didn't you protect us? This was legal by Montana standards. And the question still remains, this is still a Schedule I drug. That happened under a Democrat president that was somewhat friendly toward the idea of medicinal marijuana. So how can we still make sure that Montana is protected by doing this in Montana law if it's still a Schedule I drug?
Mr. Chair, members, I would say that it's already been passed by the voters to make it to have medical access to it. So I think that's already been established by the people in Montana that we want this. So this is just an issue of access for health care. That's how I view it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Barr, would you like to close on your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I have my little closing thing up here. Hold on.
You can grab it.
Okay. I want to thank everybody who came here today to show support. I really appreciate that. We need your voices to gain a wider perspective of what's going on here. And so when you view cannabis through the lens of medicine, you see this as an access to healthcare. You're not going to deny a cancer patient chemo, diabetic, or their insulin, a kidney failure patient, their dialysis. I think oftentimes, again, we conjure up this idea of a person who's on probation or parole. Being under community supervision should not be a determining factor in what course of treatment a patient pursues under the recommendation of a doctor. The growing list of proven health benefits is contributing to the change in public assessment. And as a legislator, I find it quite exciting knowing that as a caucus we can make monumental decisions, historic decisions that can improve the lives of others. And so I hope you'll consider this and other cannabis legislation as a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. That'll end the hearing on House Bill 498. Members, should we stretch our legs till 9:15?